Just slow-mo like LeBron.
That's right.
Throw it from there. Kobe and Shaq. Like, those two had feuds, man. They were always at each other. Once I finish an original oil painting, we don't make prints of everything, we don't license everything, we don't ever use everything, but if we ever did or wanted to, it's important to get a high-res photo before we sell the original. So what I like to do is I get the piece finished, and I've got to make sure it's got a uniform finish on it. It can be gloss, I can deal with that. It can be matte, I can deal with that, but it's got to be uniform. You don't want patches of gloss or anything matte here. And then I have these two bank lights, and I'll set them up on either side of the painting. And most of the time what I'll do is set it up to where it's not actually facing the painting, but it's facing the other light on either side. And what those lights will do is they'll cancel each other out. So if I put it here and photograph this way, there'd be a glare into the camera off of this light. But if I have both of them there, they cancel each other out. And then what I'll do is, once I get my tripod set up with my camera at the height that I want, it's focused, right depth of field, and all the settings are right, I will take my easel and just slide it up and down. This piece I shot in 3 different photos. So I shot about from the antlers up, then slid it up, didn't move the camera at all, shot the middle of the body, and then shot the bottom. And then what I'll do in Photoshop is I'll take those in, photograph them in RAW, so I've got a little bit more capability to edit them. Pull them in Photoshop, and I'll stitch those 3 photos together. I've used the stitching app, the manual part, the automated part in Photoshop before. Sometimes it works great, sometimes it's a little funky, and I've learned to just edit them and stitch them together myself. One important thing I've found too is I used to do it on auto white balance, and for some reason if the painting was really light in one place and maybe dark on the bottom, the balance would be off because the camera would auto white balance everything. So I've learned to set the settings to the tungsten light, and then include this photo card. And just the inclusion of this photo card, a lot of times the grayscale here will get the camera settings right, so that when I actually pull it into Photoshop, it's a little bit more accurate. And it's really important because it helps you get 3 equal exposures and settings on different parts of the painting. So from here, we'll take the SD card out and take them onto my Mac and pull them up in Photoshop, and I'll show you how we take the photos from here and stitch them into Photoshop, stitch them together in Photoshop for one seamless image. So now we've got the images in Photoshop, and the reason we do 3 images is basically to get a larger final size. So 3 images stitched together are going to be able to be larger than one image of the full painting. So I go in here and create a 20 by 30 document in Photoshop, which is the size of the final painting. And then I'll go in here and start taking the 3 different photos, taking the magic wand
and clipping those out, and then selecting only the painting, none of the background, none of the easel that's in there. And I'll go in there and isolate just the painting image and drag those onto the final document, the 20 by 30 document that we've created. We'll take the middle section, and now the top part of the painting, and I'll keep these in 3 different layers on Photoshop until the very end. So we'll take this larger painting, drag it over there. I don't need these, so I can close those out. And now I'm working from one file from here on out for the rest of the process. Now, throughout the photography process, sometimes angles are going to be a little funky. There might be a slight, I might not have had the camera lined up perfectly, or the easel that it was on is tilted slightly. And so these are all going to be skewed a little bit. So going into it, I know that they're not going to line up perfectly symmetrical. Photoshop has a photo merge application, and that's really good overall. A lot of times I've seen it work well, but where I've seen it go a little haywire is when you have a lot of grass, or maybe some antlers or leaves, things like that. So I personally like to do it this way. I can control the process a little bit more, and I know what I'm going for, and I'm not at the mercy of whatever the photo merge process comes up with. But if you're new to it, you may want to try the photo merge process and see how that goes for you. So here I've got the 3 images, and again, they're going to be distorted or skewed a little bit. So I go in and I manually use the Edit, Transform, Distort tool in Photoshop, and I'll distort each image. And really what you're trying to do is square these images up. When you select the image, you'll be able to see where it's out of alignment. And I just drag the corner that's out of alignment and pull that in to where it's more square. Now the bottom section here, you can see I'm working a little bit, the actual image size is a little bit smaller than the 20 by 30 that I'm working with, but you can tell where it needs to be, where the dimensions need to be within that outer frame. Here's a good example of the differences in photos. So on one, the exposure was just a little bit different, or maybe the lighting was just a little bit different towards the edges of the photo. And when that lines up with the adjacent photo, you can see a difference. One image is a little bit darker, one image might be a little bit lighter, and we'll adjust those individual images one at a time later on in the process. But for now, we want to get the deer aligned. We want to get the contour of the deer lined up correctly. Once I've got them lined up fairly well, I will go in and create a layer mask on each of these images. And then I'm essentially masking off parts of the image that I don't want. These layers are never going to align flawlessly right out of the gate. You're gonna have to require some push-pull and a give and take here. So what I'm doing here is I like the top photo of the deer. I like the focus, the exposure, the color better than I do the middle photo. So I'm going to mask off the middle photo and expose more of that top photo. The best way I've found to do that is just take a brush and manually go in and find the places that I want to see. And you'll be able to see that clearly when we get to more of the antlers. When I start brushing off the antlers, you'll be able to see where they don't quite align in the photos, but I'm choosing the top image for the antlers. I don't want the bottom image. So right here, you'll really start to be able to see where the top image dominates the bottom one. Now, dark areas like backgrounds and things like that, it doesn't make as much difference. They can be misaligned a little bit and they're never going to be able to tell. But if you have a misalignment on an antler or something like that, it'll show a really clear line where you can tell it's off. So I'll go through here and pick each piece that I want to see and keep that and mask off the parts that I don't want. Now we're going to the difference between the bottom photo and the middle photo. There's two things here. First off, the middle photo isn't quite as sharp as I wanted it to be, but it's doable, and I can sharpen it up a little bit later. The bottom photo is what I really want, though. It is a little bit darker, so we can adjust that somewhat, but I found you don't really want to adjust a ton because you start chasing your tail trying to get everything right. So what I prefer to do is mask off some of the darker parts here. You can see there's a really crisp line where the bottom photo meets the top photo. And what we're going to do is we're just going to blend that away and feather it in. Now on a deer's midsection, there's not really much variety, especially in a pose like this. It's a fairly uniform color or value. What I like to do, though, is I like to have a little bit more interest in my painting, and rather than just painting in his stomach and rib cage, the whole middle portion of his body, rather than painting just a gray mass there, I like to go in with a palette knife and add some interest, add some detail, add some contrast. That's hard to do when you're photographing it. You want that to show up in a print, because all those little details need to be blended in together. So if some of the very fine details misalign, the image can look blurry or hazy or fuzzy, and you don't want that. So you have to go in and really be careful about what you erase and what you allow to show through here. Same thing on the right side. You can see the difference, but overall this piece is stitched together pretty well.
Yep. I think we're good. So we just wrapped this up to get the high res, and again, the high resolution photos are really important for myself as an artist, just to document the painting before it sells, and also if we ever want to make prints or license the image. We don't do that for all of them, but we've got that if we need to. But this one's wrapped up. We're going to be doing a lot more cool videos like this, some behind the scenes content. So hope you enjoyed it, and really hope you follow along and see more about my original art and how they come together in my studio.